Hey guys, I'm Janet on occasion, and today we are covering the Grand Cathay roster reveal. I was going to say grand reveal. It's quite a grand reveal. We're seeing all the units now. I'm less actually interested in what the units are and more of their cultural significance because I don't know anything about Cathay yet. Well, we know plenty, but not enough for my liking. I like to know how the factions function rather than just like, they have a guy with a halberd. Oh, cool. Why? I want to know why. And this actually goes some way to telling us why in a lot of cases, which I think is really cool. And it certainly gives us more to speculate about and a bunch of other stuff, which I think is really cool. So, Total War Warhammer 3 Grand Cathay roster reveal for Total War Warhammer 3. Thank you, Ben Barrett. Once again, welcome back to Warhammer.com. You've waited too long for this one. Grand Cathay is here, and in this roster reveal, we'll be taking you through each unit, lord, and hero the Eastern Empire has to offer from what Games Workshop has created. They are a humongous, powerful nation capable of fending off attacks from every angle, including the swarms of chaos that inhabit the northern wastes. They believe, and it's hard to disagree, that should they fail, should the Great Bastion fall and Grand Cathay be laid to ruin, all the world will be doomed. I mean, that is such a huge chunk of the population of the planet that I think that would probably do it. That would give Chaos a great way in to the rest of the world, and way more worshippers under their banner, which is not good. No one really wants that. It's not a good idea to let such a powerful nation fall to Chaos. Just a bad idea all round. So hopefully we've got plenty of units to stave off that inevitability. So, to prevent this, a legion of highly trained and capable warriors stands ready to fight for their homeland. The Celestial Dragon Emperor and his mightily powerful children, the Dragons, they are leaders, generals, and heroes to their people, and the weight of responsibility hangs heavy on their shoulders. So, Enter the World of Grand Cathay. It's a trailer you guys have probably seen already. If not, why not? Go watch it. I'm not going to bother going over the trailers on the channel. I just think, if you look at it, it doesn't give us a lot of raw information, so go discover it yourself. Good. So, as a reminder, Total War Warhammer 3 is not a finished game. What you see below is an overview, not the stats of every single unit, and some things may change before release. However, still plenty to dig your teeth into here. Let's get into it. So, I guess the fluff surrounding each unit will obviously remain the same. There's a lot more likely to remain the same, but stats and things, who knows? Not that it gives us any stats, honestly. It stays pretty vague. I doubt we'll see anything change, to be honest. So, Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon. We've seen her already, but let's go over this again, see if there's anything we might have missed. So, Miao Ying believes herself to be the strongest dragon sibling. Lords her power and position of authority as protector of the Great Bastion over her brothers and sisters. Despite her earned arrogance, she is well aware of the significance of the task laid at her feet to protect Grand Cathay from the hordes of chaos to the north. It's a lot to do. So the constant scheming of the mortal lords of Nangao, her capital and unconquerable home, does not make it any easier. So we know there's already a lot of politics surrounding each of the commanderies, which is very cool. Very cool to see that is still, at the forefront. It really, to me, it feels like it's supporting the idea that maybe this will actually affect gameplay, and there'll be some interesting sort of gameplay dilemmas revolving around the politics, because it is being mentioned a lot, and although it's interesting fluff for people like me, it could also be something to add context to gameplay elements for the factions. So, we'll see. So, as such a powerful and ancient being, she emits an aura of command and a majesty that even mighty heroes find difficult to resist. Her followers seek her favour, and her enemies fear her bite and strong magics. On the battlefield, she can channel those powers to transform between her dragon and human forms as needed, which is obviously really cool. So, both dragons are also masters of the elemental winds. This attribute, which is shared among all Grand Cathay spellcasters, increases the power of all spells cast for each spellcaster in the army, which is interesting. I find that interesting. So, the more spellcasters you have, the more you can get out of each individual one, which I think is brilliant if that's the case. Because, frankly, having more than one spellcaster in an army is usually just a dumb idea. Because you can only get so much out of a spellcaster. I mean, it's a bit different with things like vampires, because they can still go toe-to-toe with people in melee and stuff, but just for like a straight-up wizard, if you have a bunch of them, you're just wasting slots in your army, and because they can't share the winds of magic around, you know? You're just going to get more value out of one than two, because they will each have less value between them, so it's just not that worthwhile having more than one spellcaster. But here, if they do actively help each other out, make each other more powerful, then that's a very cool thing. It means you can actually sort of have them in greater numbers than you normally would, which I think is really cool. I think it's very unique for a faction, so I'm happy about that. So anyway, so they're Master of the Elemental Winds, blah-de-blah-de-blah. This makes taking multiple spellcasters all the more effective for armies of Grand Cathay, even doubling or better the power of spells, should you have enough. Of course, they may not have the army to back them up at that point. So I do have some theories about how this is going to work anyway, but I think it looks like it's going to buff spells more. I was thinking yin and yang, because maintaining balance is an important thing, right? I was thinking maybe if you cast a yang spell or a yin spell, either one, that it would be something like the new rune magic for the dwarfs, where it has a cooldown of all of your magic. So a larger cooldown for the one you just cast, but also just a global cooldown. Well, not global, but like a that hero-wide cooldown, right? It could be a cooldown for all of that lore of magic. And then that cooldown could go down if the opposite wind of magic is then cast, which I think could be a really interesting way to have each sort of spellcaster benefit, not in terms of just more winds of magic, but just allowing them to spam spells more, you know, to be able to cast more spells. I think it'd be really interesting if it had that sort of cooldown mechanic where, you know, yin would lower the cooldown of yang spells when cast. I think it could be really interesting. So you never know, could be something like that. But I guess we'll see. But I like they do maintaining balance. That does seem to be persistent throughout all this stuff. So we'll see. We'll see for sure. But anyway, certainly more spellcasters are better, and that in itself it's a similar vibe. So fair enough. So unique abilities and skills. Magic. Miao Ying has access to a unique selection of spells from the laws of yin and life. So I think that's interesting because she is the favoured of the Emperor. And obviously he's known as the Immortal Dragon Emperor. Sure, his wife, you know, the Empress, is probably also equally immortal. But the Law of Life is obviously Gaidren, which is associated with green. The, you know, jade, the material, is a big sort of conduit for the Wind of Magic, Gaidren, the Wind of Life. And so it sort of made sense, I think. So if she is the favoured of the Emperor, then it makes sense that she should hold some power that sort of resembles his own, or at least sort of reflects it more accurately, which I think is really cool. So I think that's really interesting. So, disdain of dragons. All enemies who try to combat Miao Ying will find themselves at a significant disadvantage. So I guess she has an aura that debuffs enemies, I'd assume, but we don't know the specifics there. But yeah, dragons are scary, I guess. So anyway, Jiao Min, the Iron Dragon. So yeah, this is the friendlier one, but the guy who's a bit nicer to his subjects than perhaps his sister is. So, ruler of the Western Provinces, the Iron Dragon is seen as a much more down-to-earth ruler and commander than his sister. Jiao Min commands loyalty through leadership, as well as his creation and use of powerful artifacts and magic items. He is one of the Empire's premier alchemists, and welcomes the same within his realm, much to the chagrin of some of his siblings. So they don't like that he's sort of collecting all these metal wizards, as we will actually have confirmed later on, so we'll get to that. But anyway, proximity to the Warpstone Desert and the Great Moor, still seeping with the destructive magic that created it, has led some to believe his mind is beginning to unravel. This would certainly explain some of the odd tendencies and decisions he makes, but is still far from anything approaching insurrection or dangerous to Grand Cathay. While less favoured than his sister by the Celestial Dragon, their mother, the Moon Empress, has a soft spot for Jiao Min. So this I find interesting. I discussed in a previous blog post talking about him, how it seems that they're thinking that his mind is unravelling because he's doing, he makes some weird decisions, has some odd tendencies, but those tendencies seem to be like treating humans as an equal, and actually walking among them, sharing drinks with them, which is obviously madness. So is it his mind is unravelling, or is it actually just like, unlike the other dragons, he isn't a total dick? Could be that. He's not lording over them like the rest are, like they feel is the sort of natural order of things. So could be interesting to see if there is actually any sort of insanity or anything to him that sort of makes some sense there, or if it is literally just the other dragons think he's weird. So we'll see. So both dragons lead their armies with incredible fervour. Their mere presence enough to enhance the harmony and belief of their people to new heights. Non-character Cathayan units all ascribe to either Yin or Yang, and when close to the opposite, receive buffs. Melee, Yang units becoming more defensive and harder to kill, while ranged, Yin units fire faster. Lords increase these benefits when they are nearby. Between this and the Master of the Elemental Winds attribute, it makes hero spellcasters quite a powerful choice for Grand Cathay armies. They are force multipliers, both battlefield-wide and in their area of effect. Pardon me. The proper usage can see massive odds overcome. So I do like that. Again, it's sort of... It takes the whole army as a whole, you know, which I really like. Just the fact that they have these sort of multiplying benefits to them. They get like more and more ordered, which is something that I think is going to be an impossibility when it comes to balancing it all for things like multiplayer, you know, anything sort of competitive use of the faction. I think is going to be nightmarishly difficult, because a lot of the things that it is encouraging are the way that you should be playing any faction. You know, you should have melee units in support of ranged units. You shouldn't have them on separate ends of the battlefield. So the fact they're getting buffs through that, then just them being used not like an idiot is going to make them exponentially better. Or it means if you wanted to have an army that was a little bit one-sided, just for the sheer novelty, you're sort of getting punished for that, which doesn't feel great if you think of it like that. But we'll see. We'll have to see how it really plays out. I think it's cool that it really encourages you to have that sort of robust layered formations and make sure, you know, everything is in range of something that can benefit it. I think that's really cool. But yeah, I do wonder how big a difference that's going to make. Is it going to make sort of running off, you know, some cavalry on their own to harass the enemy? Is that just going to make that cavalry useless? You know, or is that going to be stopping your ranged units from being able to have a bonus that would help? You know, how is that going to be balanced exactly? I don't know, but I am super intrigued by it. It's certainly unique. The fact that's just like a core thing for their gameplay. These sort of overlapping effects. It's very strange. It's very strange. I can't wait to see how it all works. So, unique abilities and skills. Dragon transformation. Yeah, that's kind of a big one. Both dragons can also swap forms in the midst of battle, becoming powerful melee units with the ability to fly. A dragon, in other words. Magic. Xiaomin has access to a unique selection of spells from the laws of Yang and Metal. So obviously the opposite, you know, of the Yin and Yang spectrum. He's Yang, whereas his sister is Yin. And obviously Metal. He has a Lord of Metal instead of Life, which is very, very cool. There's some interesting, you know, interesting laws of magic to have for sort of your leaders of your armies. I think it's really interesting. Get some really cool stuff here. Also, Warding Iron. The Iron Dragon's near invulnerability can be passed on to his nearby troops for a short time. So that's really cool. The idea that he has an ability that actually protects the troops near him. It shows that he does actually care about those near him, and it also sort of has the whole, you know, law of metal thing going on, where he's like strengthening their armor or whatever else. But I like that. It shows more of a support role for someone who is... His personality is more supportive, frankly. He uses his power to help those of his kingdom, rather than, you know, one of his commandery, I suppose, rather than, yeah, just being the most powerful and everyone else can just suck it. It's their job to fight and die for Cathay, and why should I step in if they're in trouble? No, I've got my own stuff to kill. You guys look after yourselves. So, you know, it's pretty cool. So, Grand Cathay Lords, the dragon-blooded Shugengan Lord. This is really disappointing to me, because it turns out they went for the most boring explanation for what dragon-blooded meant, which is that they have literally the blood of dragons. They're just like the, you know, dragons' siblings and kids and nonsense. It's boring. I think it's really boring. I'm very upset about this. I thought it'd be way more fun to inject some like Warhammer grimdark into it by simply dragon-blooded, just dragon being the sort of cultural sort of metaphor, a cultural euphemism, I suppose, for powerful. If it's dragon anything, then it's powerful something in that culture, because of course dragons are at the top of the spectrum in terms of power, right? They're at the top of the hierarchy. So I thought dragon-blooded would be more of a, you know, yeah, a euphemism, basically. But no, turns out they're just straight up dragon-blooded, which I think is a bit dull. But hey, we got more dragon stuff, so I guess that's fine too. So while relatively rare, the ancient nature of the dragon siblings means their many own progeny now exist within Grand Cathay. They often rise to positions of power, not least out of respect for their heritage, but also due to the power that comes from being part of the family. The dragon-blooded, as they are known, are inevitably skilled combatants, natural sorcerers, and talented leaders. As you can imagine, their lineage could be a source of some jealousy and resentment from high-ranking mortals, especially when the dragon-blooded allow their abilities to develop into arrogance, which is sort of inevitable for this line of dragons, it seems. So as the magic wielders of Grand Cathay, the dragon-blooded fight with either the law of Yang or the law of Ying. Each takes its power from the celestial dragon emperor, and is a unique school passed down through the ages. So this, I think, is a very important bit for how the magic works. In general, I did speculate in other videos that it could be like dark and high magic, not directly like renames of them, but in such that they use all the winds of magic rather than just something on the spectrum. They use the whole, and then shape their spells out of that. And that would make it more dangerous because any human, with all of that magic, just gets corrupted. It's why Teclesian theory says only do the one wind of magic, okay? Bright wizards, just the fire magic, okay? Nothing else, too risky to, channel more magic than you can handle. And so I thought, hey, maybe in this case, it was sort of like, high or dark magic where it is all of it, but it's so dangerous that the ones that happen to survive get given the mantle of dragon-blooded, and there's thousands of millions of dead spellcasters in their wake that failed to channel all the magic. But actually no, it's through a filter. So this is something that you often see in Warhammer, is basically it's magic through something else as a conduit. So the magic of the planet is the geomantic web, that sort of is a conduit for those sort of magics that can be cast. So there's sort of a filter for that. It's not the raw stuff of chaos. It's gone through a filter of the planet. Kislev is the power of the land itself. But really, that's just the land being used as sort of a filter for the wind of magic, right? And the ice magic being brought from that, partly through crazy belief systems and partly through inherent magic wielding abilities. It's a weird magic system. But here, it is literally the case that the dragons themselves are the conduits for yin and yang magic. That is how they form their spells, and it is through their blood that magic can be channeled, which I think is really interesting, because as far as I can think of, I don't think there's any other examples of just like a sort of inherited like ability to cast spells like that. Potentially vampires. Potentially. Law of Vampires tends to be sort of, all vampires can inherently do some spells. And that's, I guess, through blood as well. So there's some, I guess there's some, yeah, I guess that can happen. And does already happen. So it's an interesting thing anyway. I always like to know where the root of their power is. And it seems that it's literally just the dragons themselves are the conduits for that, in order for them to be able to cast those spells. It's a shame that it's not something that could be pushed through just a normal mortal. Someone can't just learn yin and yang. It's purely inherited because, well, the dragons aren't going to give power to anybody, right? So, yeah, interesting. So, the Law of Yang focuses on buffing allies with resolute belief or disrupting enemies with walls of wind. In particular, dire situations can also unleash mighty explosions upon the enemy, bringing with it the power of the celestial dragon emperor himself. Their spells are Jade Shield, Dragon's Breath, Wall of Wind and Fire. Interesting to have a wall, because that's quite a unique thing, if it is actually going to be something that resembles a barrier, though it might just be a breath spell. We'll have to wait and see. But it would be interesting to have spells serve more purpose than just like damage over this shape, That's very much how damaging spells, pardon me, seem to go. It's just more or less armor piercing, and what shape damage does it do? And what's the cooldown? That's very much damaging spells, how they work. So it'd be interesting if it's actually a physical wall that couldn't be run through. Or if it's just a very long-lasting damaging effect. So if you were stood in it, you would take damage, maybe. That could be really cool. That would be a very unique approach. So, Stone Ground Stance. Interesting. So, some defensive buff there, presumably. Might of Heaven and Earth. No idea. Constellation of the Dragon? Again, I couldn't hazard a guess as to much of this. Jade Shield, I assume, will be like healing and physical resist or something. But Dragon's Breath, I assume, is just going to be a Dragon's Breath, but from a person. But yeah, dunno. I'm interested to see those in action. The Law of Ying is a more esoteric school, with the power to reflect projectiles or summon the ghosts of the dead to assist in battle. That's kind of cool, right? Sort of necromantic nonsense there. So pretty interesting. Those who practice it can shield their allies behind obfuscation and remove foes in the dead of night. Their spells are Storm of Shadows, Cloak of Jet, Missile Mirror, that actually reflects magic missiles, as far as I'm aware, which is very unique to have some kind of counterspell thing going on. Blossom Wind, I assume is a healing thing, I'd guess, but maybe not. Talons of Night and Ancestral Warriors, so yeah, bring back the souls of the dead, which makes sense, because isn't, I'm basically just getting this from Avatar, but the moon is something to do with the afterlife, right? It's a portal to the after, to the afterlife or whatever. It's something to do with that, right? But anyway, so that's an interesting idea to be able to actually bring these ancestral warriors back, and that is something that I will come back to later for another unit, so we'll see. But yeah, spells sound cool, and looks like there's plenty of opportunity to do something unique with these. So next up, also the mounts are a warhorse or jade longma. The longma is the flying horse thing, which we'll see later. So, Lord Magistrate, or Dragon Horse, I guess. It looks weird. It's a thing. So, Lord Magistrate. Be they generals or lords of one of the Grand Cathay's gargantuan cities, magistrates are some of the best the Empire has to offer. While not the greatest single combatants of their nation, they are expert commanders, inspiring and directing their troops with a skill and efficiency that comes only from years of experience in real battles. If they are engaged, they are melee warriors capable of holding their own against most enemies. In particularly large engagements, magistrates may ride aboard a sky lantern, commanding their troops from above with a more strategic view of the battlefield. It also, as you can imagine, keeps them somewhat out of harm's way, a priority for some, if not all. Their true strength lies in their ability to bring the best of Grand Cathay to the fore, vastly increasing the bonuses received by troops working in harmony with one another. So Warhorse or Sky Lantern mounts for them. So this is super interesting because the Sky Lantern is the one that is it's got the like Warplock Jezzails, but not Warplock Jezzails. Their own version, which we'll get to. So it's very slow, just sits there, can sort of snipe, and it's a support balloon basically, which I think is really interesting because the Lord Magistrate, I like the idea of their melee lord being not a straight up melee lord, right? They're just normal dude, stood around being a commander, being a general, not in that heroic sense, because why would he? He's nothing compared to the dragons that rule over Cathay. So the idea of there being a sort of dedicated melee lord other than one of the dragons, it just is a waste. It either undermines the strength of the dragons by making something else comparable, or it just gives you like a B-team version of something you already have. So it's just, yeah, it would be a waste. So the idea of like a dedicated support lord, I think is really interesting. I really like that. Just making sure that the rank and file are doing their job, which really is, what they should be doing. Also, the fact that he's a magistrate of the cities, it's literally just the guy that's the highest rank in the city, where government and military are much the same in this culture, which I think is really cool. I think it's a really interesting thing to have for a sort of a civilization like this. It's very interesting and despotic. But yeah, here we are. I think it's really cool. So next up we have alchemists. They look amazing, love all the masks and everything. The whole vibe is really cool. It's just sort of like, I don't know, geisha meets firebenders, That's what it looks like. I think it's really cool. I think it's very, very cool. So the laws of yin and yang are not the only magics practiced in Grand Cathay, though they are the most favoured, because of course they're the ones that the dragon-blooded use, so, they're obviously going to be seen with higher regard. Alchemists gravitate to the Iron Dragon in the west and the city of Shanyang, precisely because he is uncommonly accepting of their talents and practices. Over the years, this has grown into a powerful cabal that often sees its members hired by generals all over the Empire, as their capabilities are far beyond that of most mortals. Their potions imbue them with spells from the lore of metal, as well as giving them unique buffs that can be applied to themselves or nearby units, providing massive bonuses to attack or armour. So this I find really fun, that specifically it's their power doesn't simply derive from their sort of natural magical abilities, but is enhanced through alchemy, which I think is really fun. It sort of expands on the sort of metal wizardry of the Empire, and it's just it's more archaic and more sort of mysticism, and it sort of plays into that sort of weird trope of sort of these ancient Chinese medicines and things, all these interesting potions and yeah, it's sort of the mysticism what folded into the Warhammer stuff, which I think is really cool. I think it's really interesting as a way to use these sort of quite silly tropes, really, of the world. So I think it's really fun. I think it's really cool. So yeah, having potions to imbue them with the magic, as well as being talented people as well, they found ways to enhance that. And so close to the Great Maw, yeah, there's a lot of materials you can use for enhancing magic, with all that warp stone. Dangerous as it is, at least they got a dragon looking out for them, who is probably powerful enough to know how to utilise that a little bit more safely, especially because it does seem like he has some degree of care for those under him. So I think it's really interesting, really cool, just thematically very cool. And then we also have the Astromancers. Astromancers are the accepted sorcerers of Grand Cathay, practising the Celestial Dragon Emperor's favoured lore of heavens and harnessing it to an expert level, thanks to the natural affinity between their leader and the Azir Wind. After more than 5,000 years of perfecting the art, they are quite adept, and only more so when riding to battle aboard the Wuxing War Compass, which we'll get to. That's right, there's a war compass. Sounds ridiculous, right? So, Warhorse or the Wuxing War Compass as their mount. So, Grand Cathay units. That's right, we're done with the heroes now. I should probably comment on this. So we do have Law of Heavens. So we've got Law of Heavens and Law of Metal as the two sort of pedestrian ones. And we have Yin and Yang being the two brand new fancy magics. So, pretty cool. Also, I like that the Celestial Dragon, obviously Celestial, you get Law of Heavens, so you've got all that stuff covered, thematically. Which, yeah, makes total sense that they would be sort of favoured and fine, whereas the metal wizards, although they've grown very powerful, over a character with a niche interest in metal wizardry. If there are any other wizards kicking around Cathay, I'd love to hear about it, but it could just be that they're simply, hedge wizards that can cast other magics, but they're just not accepted, so they're immediately seen as heretics, same way that the Empire sees sort of non-licensed wizards to be just a bunch of heretics. So maybe there's a similar vibe going on there, that the other laws of magic simply can't exist due to the cultural difficulties. So it could be really cool to see how that goes. People with law of life, maybe it's just a bit too close to what the Emperor's doing with this whole immortality thing. So yeah, none of that. You're clearly just pretending. Get out of here. So, it could be seen as sort of blasphemous. They're not blasphemous because technically the dragons don't see themselves as gods and they don't want other people to say they're gods. I wonder if that's arrogance rather than humility, though. Be like, gods, we're dragons. Way better. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So, Grand Cathay units. Finally. So, Peasant Long Spearmen. So we've got some pikemen, cheapest thing, makes total sense for a defensive army to have some just cheap line infantry like that. So the backbone of Grand Cathay is its people, and they are numerous beyond count. While the Celestial Dragon Emperor is wise and his children are benevolent leaders to the people under their command, they understand with the detachment of immortality that one thing they will always have is more bodies. Doesn't sound very benevolent. It's like, oh yeah, we care about all of you. 1 million of you, pick up a stick and go over there and fight that demon. Brilliant. Bye. Bye. Don't worry, your lives are fleeting anyway. Doesn't make any difference. Off you go. Loved ones, pfft, get out of here. So anyway, I don't think Dragon's very cool, guys. So, more men and women to man the battlements, more fighters to hold the line, more defenders to make the forces arrayed against them fight for every inch. Also, I do love that it's men and women, because humans are just nothing. Right, so the idea of gender being of any import makes a lot of sense. I think they would just go, yeah, screw it. So I think even the most like misogynistic of Warhammer fan going, oh no, you can't have women in a battle because they're women. Wah. Yeah, everyone is wah. Okay, everyone sucks. They're humans. They're all fragile. They can all go. All right. So don't give me any historical nonsense. No army has been led by a dragon before, mate. So you know, deal with it. Men and women in the battlefield. That I love. So more fighters to hold the line, more defenders to make the forces arrayed against them fight for every inch. Thus, the least trained armies of Grand Cathay are still a power to be reckoned with, through sheer force of numbers. Unlike the hired soldiers or lower classes of other factions, the warriors of Wind and Field, as they are known, which is a cool thing. Wind and Field. Interesting. As they are known, feel a fierce loyalty to their cause and the dragons that watch over them. They may buckle and even break, but they know their role. So yeah, they know their place, because they are constantly told their place. This reminds me of the Terracotta Sentinels, which we'll get to in a second as well, but they're everywhere, you know, like looking over fields and everything, just wherever they've finished fighting, there they're stood, right, scattered all over the place. Just idle, but looking powerful and terrifying and beyond what any mortal man could ever build. And so seeing them when you're just sort of like on your rice paddies or whatever, you're gonna know who's in charge. Be like, oh yeah, our emperor built those. We shouldn't mess with him. You know, they're just like, it's the same way you'd put statues up all over the place, you know. I mean, the British Empire were big on putting statues of you know, Queen Victoria all over the empire, just to be like, yeah, she's in charge, you can tell, she's got a statue. People went, oh yeah, they've got muskets and a navy and stuff, yeah, shouldn't mess. It's really nefarious, but hey, it's an empire, right? So imperials are going to imperial, right? So anyway, like all melee units, peasant long spearmen are yang aligned, increasing their leadership and melee defense when within close proximity to a Yin unit. Their long spears give them fantastic charge defense when bracing, making them a suitable anti-cavalry and anti-large force. So that's, I mean, it says suitable, but yeah, I'm sure you could break them pretty easily. They are just militia at the end of the day, and human militia, not like, you know, high elf militia. No, these are rubbish militia. So as noted, the endless ranks of Grand Cathay are expendable and expected to flee from battle when facing more than they can handle. Finishing the fight is the work of the more disciplined warriors, which we have now gotten to. Jade warriors. Jade obviously being the material that is connected to the Emperor. So the Jade Warriors are Grand Cathay's line troops. They are the standing army, expertly trained and well equipped to defend from ogres, rebels, chaos, or anything else that might come wandering in from the west and north. Each city maintains its own regiment of Jade Warriors, and few make their home outside of one of the metropolises that dot the landscape of Cathay. So these are sort of the state troops, but the fact that the state troops are Jade Warriors, so deeply connected to, like, the Emperor, everyone knows who's really in charge. It's not whoever's in charge of the city, no, it's the Emperor, which I think is interesting. So in times of war, they will head to battle armed in numerous possible ways, collectively known as the Warriors of Jade and Steel. Very cool. The ranged firepower of Grand Cathay is what breaks the enemy, but the Jade Warriors, so named for the Celestial Dragon's Emperor's Sacred Stone, pardon me, must hold the line and cut down enemies who think them weak. So very, very cool. Very cool indeed. Variants, sword and shield, or halberd. So yeah, get some good variety there with the Jade Warriors, which I like. Notable characteristics, long trained to defend Grand Cathay against the relentless assaults from beyond the Grand Bastion. Jade Warriors adopt a defensive stance when immobile, making them harder to charge and kill. So I guess they just they can brace well, they have good charge defense. What's the thing there? Is it a particular stance that gives them extra melee defense when they're not marching or something? What is that? I wonder. It could just be that they brace and they have charge defense because they're halberd units or something. I don't know. This builds as they remain that way, taking the lay of the land and bedding in to fend off the next attack, further increasing their charge resistance and armor. Okay, so just their stats keep building the longer they're stood there, which seems kind of cool actually. But I mean, it's a bit boring to turtle, but interesting that you're forced to try and stop anytime you can, you know. So it means when you do move, it's very well intentioned, you know. It's for serious purpose, not just because you're running up and down, you know, trying to find an opening. So it has to be very intentioned, your movements, which is kind of cool. So while the halberd-wielding variant is unable to block missile fire due to the lack of shields, it is no less adept at bedding in to take a charge head-on and destroy any force foolish enough to challenge them. Lovely. Then we have the Celestial Dragon Guard. So Grand Cathay's elite soldiers are officially the leader of the Dragon Emperor, his loyal defenders. As the Eastern Empire has expanded, more and more Dragon Guard have been added to the Celestial Host, which now numbers enough that they can be dispatched to battlefields all over the East. Their arrival represents an exponential increase in power for the army, not least for the morale boost it gives the soldiers to see such a direct connection to their Emperor. So this is interesting. So I did speculate that the ones who are obviously the Jade Warriors with the elite ones because of the Jade, but it seems that they just want that influence everywhere. No, all the crazy gold nonsense, that's a little bit more showy. So when these guys show up, you really know that the Emperor is on a mission to do something. So you can really, I guess, they're just more obvious on the battlefield, these like gleaming gold sods. So love it. Very cool to see. Notable characteristics: wielding halberds, they are natural opponents to the armoured and the massive, as capable of spearing a beast from the Chaos Wastes as a man from his horse. However, as the most well-trained unit in Grand Cathay, they are capable of defending against charges from anything, be it Chaos Warrior or Skaven Slave. That, I think, is a weird way to end that sentence. To go, they can deal with anything, from infantry to worse infantry. If you're trying to show their versatility, maybe list one thing that's infantry and one thing that isn't infantry? Just a thought, but, you know, they're versatile, is what they're getting at. So they are superior to their brothers in the Jade Warriors in every way but one. There are simply less Celestial Dragon Guard out there. Fewer Celestial Dragon Guard out there. But I'll allow it. Grand Cathay Missile Infantry. Peasant Archers. Hooray! I like Peasant Archers. You know, for Bretonia. I assume these are the same. Because, you know, Peasant Archers. So archery is considered a noble and useful pastime in Grand Cathay, and young girls are especially encouraged to follow the path of the Moon Empress into ranged combat. Thus, even the lowest in society will have a well-maintained bow within their household and be more than capable of drawing it to defend their home. Naturally, however, they are not particularly well equipped and are more deterrent than professionals, which makes a lot of sense. That's often the case with bowmen in armies, even historically. It's just a very cheap weapon, and you don't have to be drilled, really. You know, if you just draw a bow and someone shouts, shoot, you just let go, and there you go. The enemy has a billion little sharp sticks flying towards them. You know, it's just a very simple weapon to just throw in with even just very, very basic ill-trained troops, you know. So it makes a lot of sense. So, notable characteristics. As with any ranged unit among Cathayan armies, peasant archers are yin-aligned, receiving bonuses when close to yang units. Also expendable, though slightly less expected to be in the thick of things as an archer. However, despite their mighty number and decent training, the gear of the peasantry is simply unlikely to cause much damage to heavily armoured foes. Yeah, sharp sticks, big old, you know, Chaos Warrior, sure. And it does say they have decent training, so, which is interesting. Particularly not well equipped, I guess, because they're broke, but they get the training because they better bloody train to fight off the enemies of the Empire, or what good are they? So I guess there's that aspect to it, but, you know. So, Iron Hail Gunners. Iron Hail, very cool. That sounds great. That would actually be a great unit in the Kislev roster, because Iron Hail, it just sounds ice-related. You know, shooting ice bullets would be pretty cool. So anyway, it's not though, it's a Cathay thing, because it's here, because we're reading about it in this thing that we are reading. So the closest we can get to an old world shotgun. The Iron Hail gun is a short-range blunderbuss that can rip through almost anything if positioned correctly. The gunners themselves are lightly armoured, making them vulnerable if surprised, and quite the glass cannon of a unit. However, should they bring their guns to bear even for a moment, never mind a sustained period, it spells doom for even, pardon me, the heaviest warriors. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, it's going to be a unit similar to the hand cannons for the Vampire Coast, I'd imagine, which is kind of cool, but seems a bit, I don't know, I can imagine it'd be quite difficult to utilise that well, you know, due to line of sight issues and things. I mean, the Vampire Coast have that problem anyway, and that's when they can sort of just get charged and just shoot into whatever's in melee with them. If you put them on guard mode, they can do stuff like that because they're unbreakable, because they're undead, right? These guys aren't. They take a charge, they're probably going to get killed and break quite quickly. So putting them in a position where they can actually fire might be a little difficult. It might be a little difficult with the short range. So we'll have to see how they play out. But yeah, I'm sure if you get them in a good spot, they're going to do a hell of a lot of work. So, notable characteristics. The strength of gunpowder gives these units a heavy, armour-piercing punch when they line up a shot. Their range is much shorter than either archers or crossbowmen elsewhere in the army. However, this can be quite an advantage when used to keep them in a useful position for harmony and still pumping out heavy damage. We have the crane gunners. I like the crane gunners. I believe the crane martial art is all about range, so I think that's where they got that thing. Because obviously the crane, you know, it's a fishing bird. It's got like a big beak, and it can spear people from spear fish from a long way. So it's got that reach. So they have a sniper rifle being named after that, with the connection to kung fu, and also the bird that the kung fu is named after is a bit of a sniper of the thing. Yeah, it's a thing. I can connect the dots. There's breadcrumbs. I appreciate it. So the mighty crane gun requires 2 people to lift, set up, and fire. One is positioned at the trigger, ready to sight and shoot anything in a massive range. The other carries a tower shield on which the gun rests, studying the shooter as well as providing built-in cover. It is a specialist device for the highly trained, but it can be devastatingly effective when properly employed. Range and precision are nothing to scoff at, especially if they are pointed at your head. So I find this interesting, because I wonder if the Skaven came up with warp block Jezzails as a result of seeing this. But it also makes me think, well, the ones that traditionally went east were Eshin, not Mulder, you know, Ikit Claws 1, Scryer. So the idea of warp block Jezzails coming from the east is an interesting one, you know, shows some extra spread from Skaven, you know, there's more communication between maybe Eshin and the other, you know, maybe we might find out, maybe not. It could just be that it's a cool concept for a gun, so they put it in. It could just be simply that. So, notable characteristics. Save artillery will outrange anything on the battlefield, acting as effective snipers. Their armour-piercing rounds and heavy shields make them a unique and difficult unit for enemies to deal with, especially if unprepared. Well, yeah, warp block Jezzails are an absolute nuisance to handle if you're not really prepared for them, if you can't get on top of them quickly, or you don't have, you know, a bunch of cannons to blow them up from a, you know, slightly longer range. So, 2 people for the price of 1. Bargain. I mean, people are a bargain in Cathay, by the sounds of things. So, Jade Warrior Crossbowmen. So this is interesting. Crossbowmen are the ranged backbone of the Grand Cathayan army, assigned to Jade Warriors and Dragon Guard who show an aptitude for shooting rather than stabbing. While Grand Cathay brings powerful magics and giant machinery to war, it is less ever-present in their armies than other factions. Sorcerers are an important precious resource, while the construction required for a lantern or war compass may be beyond the poorer cities. So, again, sort of reeks of the sort of inequalities inherent in, you know, an empire. So I like that they have to rely on cheaper materials while still having that sort of status thing of, you know, the heavy armour and the jade, you know, to be like, yep, still representing the Emperor, guys. But yeah, crossbows are just a lot cheaper to have en masse like that, which is interesting. So, you know, less finesse required in crafting all this stuff. So sorcerers are important, blah blah blah. The crossbow is as close to industrialised production as the handcrafted weapons in Grand Cathay get, though there will still be subtle differences between the direction of one master artificer to another. This makes the Jade Warriors equipped with crossbows the mainstay of city defence, entrusted to outrange their opponents and defeat them before they get within striking distance. So I do quite like this, although it can often seem a bit lazy to go, oh, here's a unit, and here's just like the same unit equipped by a bunch of different things. It's a status thing with Cathay, you know, it's about having a uniform to represent everything. It's got to be very uniform in how the army is built, because you've got to have that sort of status immediately evident when you see them to go, oh yes, that is one of the Jade Warriors, you know, whatever they do, they have to all be the same to sort of have that presence, which I think is interesting. Also, it does point out they're mostly in the cities, which makes me think they're more like the town watch and things, but obviously with the colours of the Emperor, it's very much the Emperor is looking out for you, or the Emperor is making, stopping crime, or the Emperor is making sure you don't do anything wrong. So I think it's pretty cool. Notable characteristics: while their armour weighs them down slightly, they will defeat a peasant archer in all other areas. That increased armour, especially when further improved with a shield, makes them difficult for other ranged units to trade with effectively, because they do come in crossbow and shield variants, as well as sword and shield and halberd, of course. While not a melee troop, will happily survive and even defeat lesser foes in the midst of a close range engagement. Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. I do kind of like that. It makes me think that they're sort of a mid. Well, I mean, they are mid-tier, aren't they? Like all of these Jade warriors, they strike me as sort of white lions, sort of white lion tier, which I think is a good way to think about it. So, sort of mid-tier armoured infantry. So, Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen. When the Celestial Host, the combined name for the various sections of the Dragon Guard, makes war, it does so in style with power. The dragon crossbows are repeating powerhouses with armour-piercing bolts to rip through almost anything, and fierce training to keep up the fire. Pardon me, keep up the fire. So immediately, the more elite of their archers, the more elite of their units get access to the best equipment. So it's the repeating crossbows rather than just a standard crossbow. So immediately when they take to the field, the effect that they have on the battlefield is way more immediately apparent for all of the onlookers, because it's got to be that way. You can't have the best equipment handed out to everybody. No, just to the chosen of the dragons, the Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen. So again, it's all about status here, by the seams of it. Immediately got to make them more fancy. They're not better trained, they're better equipped in everything, Just better in every way. It's got to be that way, because they're representing the Dragon Emperor and Empress themselves, So they've got to really make everyone else look rubbish. So, shielded with the best armour in Grand Cathay, very little can stand up to a hail of bolts from these troops. Notable characteristics: crane gunners will outrange and outdamage them. The Celestial Dragon Guard are hardier and more powerful in all forms of warfare. Shields keep them protected, while the power of their crossbows makes their bolts armour-piercing. While not a true hybrid, are also more capable of holding their own in battle. So, they're going to be heavily armoured, they're going to be pretty sturdy, well-trained, so I like the idea of them being a sort of a heavy ranged unit, can hold their own against lesser forces. That's really, I think that's really fun. I think that's really cool. It makes it quite unique. But also, a bit iffy in multiplayer, I think, if you want to spare the cash, just get ranged units that maybe it can be a lot more cost effective, because you're going to have to pay for all that heavy armour, and they're not going to be able to go toe to toe with sort of like elite units in melee, so you wrap them up quickly and you just got very expensive armoured infantry that don't do much damage. So it's going to be some interesting trade-offs for using a unit that elite that is a ranged unit, So Grand Cathay Cavalry and Chariots. Peasant Horsemen. So, as they are everywhere in the world, the horse is the most common steed and beast of burden in Grand Cathay. Plenty of the peasantry learn to ride them as part of their duties, and carrying goods or information across great distances of the nation is tantamount to its survival. Thus, when called to war, many can mount up and act as scouts or harrying attackers for larger armies. So just peasant horsemen, just going to be like yeomen horsemen, isn't it? So, fair enough, like mounted yeomen. Notable characteristics: the fastest Cathayan unit that can't fly. Will deploy ahead of the main army to scout and act as a vanguard, so you get vanguard deployment, which is nice. You can scout the area out and harass some skirmishers, perhaps. Like foot melee units, cavalry belong to the Yang harmony, which is interesting because if they are out there on their own, it's going to be very difficult to make sure you can get the buffs of them being near Yin units, so you're not going to be able to get that harmony bonus from them if they are out doing things, which is why I'm very intrigued to know how much of a difference harmony is going to make to these units, because does that mean you're going to have some like trash like peasant archers just chase them around to try and give them some more buffs? Like, what are you going to do there? I don't know. Could be interesting. So, Jade Lancers. Jade Lancers, much more elite, and obviously Jade, representing the Emperor. So put a Jade Warrior with all their training, all their armour and all their power on a horse, and this is what you get. Grand Cathay's mainstay cavalry is hard-hitting, well-armoured force. Sorry, is a hard-hitting, well-armoured force. Often, the Jade Lancers are part of scouting groups that head beyond the Great Bastion to break up and destroy Chaos tribes in the region before they can gather their power and be a threat. Doing so is as dangerous as it is necessary. So don't let the chaps with the wings here distract you. This is for the whole chapter, as it were. But think of these guys like cataphracts, which is pretty cool. So, slower but heavier than standard horsemen, Jade Lancers will deal extreme damage to infantry formations they crash into. They are also great on the defence, heavily armoured with shields to protect themselves further. So, very good for oppressing people too. Heavily armoured units, that's traditionally what they were used for, quite a lot. You know, these chaos, forces outside, they're all going to be, roving bands. They're not going to have all this decent equipment and high armor piercing stuff. So just being a mobile tank that could just bash everyone over. It's pretty ideal. So slower but heavier than standard horsemen, Jade Lancers will deal extreme damage to infantry formations they crash into. They are also great on the defence, heavily armoured. Here we go. Conforming to Grand Cathay's defensive nature, they are far hardier than other factions' cavalry of a similar sort. Great Longmar riders. So that'd be the flying chaps. At least that's what I assume. It doesn't specifically say that anywhere, but they haven't mentioned the flying chaps at all specifically. Well, they haven't mentioned anything else is a flying chap, so I'm pretty sure the Longmar riders. The Longmar is it. You can also get the Longmar as a mount option for the dragon-blooded ones. Dragon-blooded heroes, so lords rather. So dragon-blooded, who are not yet to rise to their own prominence, or prefer a place within the celestial host for the honour it brings, often become great Longmar riders. Flying to battle alongside other elements of the celestial host, they are the solution to endless problems on the battlefield, from enemy flyers to the hardiest of ground troops. Notable characteristics. While Grand Cathay is often focused on dealing damage from afar, anything in the way of a great Longmar rider is unlikely to survive for long. Their speed, the power of their charge, and the strength of their armour is unmatched. Such is the strength of the Longmar charge that enemies have been known to flee in fear before they are even beaten. So Pegasus riders with high armour and fear, I guess. It's pretty cool. Maybe even terror? It says specifically flee in fear, which I think means they can't really give them terror, because fear and terror are a thing, so I think you have to be more specific when it's a Warhammer thing, or else people like me are going to point it out and create a 10-minute video on it, all on its lonesome. I wouldn't do that, don't worry. Anyway, Grand Cathay constructs. Terracotta Sentinel. So we mentioned these earlier, of course, and we have looked at these on the Games Workshop blog in an earlier video. So Grand Cathay's ancient protectors, the Terracotta Sentinels, are remnants of an era long past. When the Celestial Dragon Emperor was an active leader in the nation's armies, tales of their creation range from the believable to the legendary. That each was a personally blessed soldier of the Dragon Emperor in a great army to fend off chaos in its earliest years. Now that I find very interesting, and we'll get back to it. So, true or not, they stand sentinel over all Cathay, often silent and still for centuries, overlooking paddy fields, or partially submerged in rivers, or often as stanchions in the Great Bastion itself. But the light within will burn, and the statue will finally move if summoned to a nearby threat. So again, them being these constant sentinels, it makes me just think of the, all the statues you put up everywhere. Also, if they are indeed built from sort of the heroes of old, right, then there is that sense of like, oh, these are great heroes, don't want to mess with them because then I am an enemy of said heroes. It's just, they're an example as much as intimidation and protection. So, interesting mechanic, but with the idea of being able to bring back ancestors to raise them from the dead, with is it yin magic? I think it's yin magic. It might be yang magic. I might be getting them back to front, but I'm going to be getting them back to front for the next, several months at least. So you just have to deal with it. But one of the magics could bring ancestors back to life. So if there is that sense of being able to access the underworld, and being able to sort of essentially raise things from the dead, then they have some power over souls, right? Much like the gods of Warhammer do, which I think is rather interesting. They don't want to be worshipped as gods, but it doesn't mean that they don't necessarily have power over similar nature, which I think is interesting. You've got to remember, The dragon blundered. They're all still getting their power from the big dragons, you know. So they're still channeling that power from them. So I think it's a really interesting idea that perhaps it is totally true that they do have that power over the souls of their followers, and they can, in fact, kind of like the dreadnoughts of the Space Marines, go, oh, ancient hero, get in the tank, get in a stompy robot, go fight things. So, you know, it could be like that. This could be part burial, part murder robot, which is interesting because the terracotta sentinels, the terracotta warriors, now I'm getting it the other way around. I've been calling these guys terracotta warriors for ages, and now I'm calling the terracotta warriors terracotta sentinels, you know, the real life terracotta warriors. They were there to represent the dead, as far as I'm aware. It was a burial site of sorts, wasn't it? So the idea of this honouring the dead, but because it's Warhammer, also magically killing stuff long past your sell-by date, I think it's brilliant. I think it's really cool. I think they're a really interesting unit. But that idea of having control over souls is, yeah. I'm starting to think that they don't want to be called gods because of arrogance, frankly. Everything is telling me that they're that arrogant. So, who knows? Maybe they do have similar power. I mean, it did say that we're playing as the the legendary lords of the son and daughter of the emperor and empress, because they would be too powerful to be playable characters, right? And everything else is seemingly backing that up, which is cool. So, notable characteristics: the ultimate in Cathayan defense of their settlements and armies, laying waste to anything unlucky enough to make contact with it. Since they're everywhere, I really hope there'll be something like the rites that Warhammer 2 factions have, where you can literally just like awaken one. In a province, almost like a temporary commandment or something, that one will join every battle in like your areas. You know, just other ways to just add these units to random armies at times. I think it would be really fun because they are there watching over the whole kingdom, the whole empire. So the idea of them being able to actually join the fray, if there's one nearby, I think would be really fun. I think it'd be really nice, rather than just being like a boring old, I'll build the recruitment building and buy one, you know. That's just not very fun. It's not very thematic, is it? So that almost implies they're building a new one, but of course that wouldn't be happening. So yeah, I like it. I like that idea anyway. I like the unit, but hopefully they'll be able to weave their whole theme into the mechanics somehow. We'll soon find out, I'm sure. So, truly alien to most of the armies of the world, and either impossibly massive or an ancient enemy, it causes deep terror in the hearts of any who array against it. I do wonder if the Hyro Titan was based on these guys, because Hyro Titans aren't quite as ancient. The lands of the Tomb Kings, that was all, that empire was built after Chaos came in and did its thing. So I do wonder. So, as happy destroying steam tanks and city gates as it is laying waste to enemy armies. So yeah, all-rounder. It's just like a giant. It's a big thing that hits hard, seemingly. So, Grand Cathay flying war machines. Sky Lantern. So I like the look of these. Also, they got things for yin and yang on them by the looks of it. So really, really cool. I love the little dragon motif. They're just beautiful things. That's really cool. Just so Warhammer for like something like this to be a tool of battle, a tool of war. It's very, very cool. So Sky Lanterns serve dual purposes on the battlefield. They are often crewed by magistrates, as we've seen earlier, or other commanders that can oversee and direct the troops below. Using a complex system of fans and smoke, they oversee and command and the rest of it. However, they are also crewed by 4 crane gunners, sitting in an armoured carriage held aloft by the balloon, itself in place thanks to an ever-burning vermilion warbird, which I really want to know if it's a relation to the Phoenix. I really want to know that. Also, I want to know if the vermilion warbird is game for this, or if it's, just stuck and prodded. I'd love to know more about the fact that it's a flaming bird flown balloon, because I don't think we really have those in real life. So I can't really compare it to anything, funnily enough. So anyway, I'd love to know more about that. So it is generally agreed they have a lot more fun than their landlocked cousins. I'm assuming they mean the crane gunners and not the imprisoned Firebird. but hey, who knows? Who knows, right? So notable characteristics. While glacially slow to move around the battlefield, it provides a much-needed vantage point for troops below, allowing them to spot enemies hiding in foliage and giving them a morale boost. I like the idea of having a line of sight in forests and things to stop ambushes. I think that's really fun. You can use it like as a proper scout balloon. I think that's really cool. So the crane gunners are truly deadly. Nothing is between them and their targets. They do not have to stop to fire, and they can all see from above. They can see all from above, rather. Yeah. Snipers that you can't hide behind anything to stop them shooting you. It's kind of scary. So as flying units armed with gunners, both this and the Sky Junk are Yin aligned. Sky Junk. So this one, obviously a lot more fancy indeed. And yeah, multi-leveled, just very fancy. It's very fancy. So the Sky Junk is more warship than a simple battlefield unit. Its humongous size supports great guns that project shrapnel at oncoming hordes, wiping out whole battle lines. Within the armoured carrier beneath the main balloon are a host of bombs ready to be dropped on those below. During times of great danger, fleets of Sky Junks are seen floating from the Great Bastion, moving steadily towards the latest threat and fully intending to wipe it out. Notable characteristics: a larger and more deadly Sky Lantern, packed with soldiers that spew fire rain rockets at enemies. That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. The fact to just shoot rockets and things. It's a firework display, basically, which I think is awesome. I mean, why not, right? Why not have, oh, you know, Chinese New Year? What if that, but weaponized? I think it's great. So, I love it. Excuse me. My tea is freezing right now. We've been doing this for over an hour. No wonder my voice is getting crackly. Anyway, so, what is next? Can drop makeshift bombs from above on unsuspecting foes, dealing massive damage. So also like gyro bombers, which is really interesting. So while the enemy are sort of encroaching on your battle lines, your very dug-in battle lines, rockets are being blasted at everything that's moving in, and then when they do get into melee, you can just start dropping bombs on all of them, and all the survivors, so that's really cool and terrifying. Slow and near useless once out of ammunition. Presumably they've done enough damage to warrant their cost by then, so, The Sky Junk is nevertheless an incredibly valuable addition to the battlefield if used right. Very cool. So, Grand Cathay artillery and war machines. We're in the last chunk, finally. So, Grand Cannon. Oxen carry the artillery of Grand Cathay to war, pulling these guns to battle from their city walls and great bastion they usually inhabit. So, another segue that isn't really fluff related. I like the idea that it's oxen. I like the varieties being used there, just like a heavier beast of burden for bigger guns, right? Fine. But that is something that could have easily been the case with the Empire, with a bunch of their stuff, but it never was, and I think a lot of that is because modelling several different creatures for pulling war machines around is just a lot of hassle. Certainly it was in the 90s, where most of the artillery of the Empire was sort of, finalised. So it's only now that they have like 3D rendering. They don't have to have people individually hand sculpt everything. All the new models. I assume it's just a lot easier to be like, oh yeah, just someone make an oxen, alright, to pull this thing. And it's not going to be this huge project, and it's not going to be particularly more expensive to make some oxen to pull them. I just think the miniatures range can be more adaptable to sort of these different sort of niche designs, rather than just going, oh, it's a chariot pulled by a horse. Or, oh, it's a knight, it's on a horse. Or, oh, it's a artillery pulled by a horse, it's a horse. Just always got to be the same for the sake of cost, basically. Whereas now, they can be a bit more flexible and they can put a bit more flair here. Because Kislev, they've got the bears pulling their artillery, and these guys got oxen. It's just practical uses for things that, it just makes a lot of sense, frankly. So I like it, is what I'm getting at. So, more suited to firing from on high, these cannons will still rip apart anything they gain sighting on, but benefit greatly from smartly used terrain. Shaped like dragons and belching flaming projectiles, they are not a subtle representation of Grand Cathay's power. So these are the Grand Cannon, not to be confused with Great Cannons, but they work like flame cannons. So they're great flame cannons, Grand Cannons. Fantastic. So very, very cool that. I do like the idea of that, and obviously shaped like dragons, flame breath, but Pretty cool. So, notable characteristics. While being Grand Cathay's most basic form of artillery, they still pack a huge punch, more than capable of toppling monsters or city walls. The flaming, armour-piercing projectiles will make short work of smaller foes placed in their path. The oxen pulling it are pretty cute, all told, and make it, and other Cathayan artillery, more mobile than counterparts from other factions, which I think is a actually quite a bizarre notion, that Cathay's artillery is more mobile than that of other factions, when they aren't a very mobile faction. So I find that kind of interesting. That's an interesting thing to think about. But, presumably, because artillery isn't everywhere, when it is needed, it needs to get there in a hurry. Because there's only so much. Because they aren't as industrialized as the Empire. So, you know, these choice piece of equipment, they need to get to the battle that they need to be at. You know, because it's not like every battlefield has a bunch of cannons in a town or city nearby. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's really cool to see. But anyway, notable characteristics. Yep, we've looked at all that. Now the Ushin War Compass. Whereas normally the red bit points north, this points to your doom. Talking nonsense, don't worry about me. It's been a long day. So, perhaps the oddest part of Grand Cathay's armoury to an outsider, this miniaturised version of the Great Compass engraved into the floor of the Celestial Court, high above Wei Jin, is a powerful tool for manipulation of the elemental winds. Imbued with the power of heavens, and intricately designed as a weapon of war, meteors and lightning storms are summoned in its wake. Awesome. While expensive to build and maintain, they are a truly unique weapon. So obviously the elemental winds are simply the 8 winds of magic. It's just like a celestial hurricanum, basically, playing on the same things. So Law of Heavens being used to power this stuff. But I do like the idea that this just is slightly more impressive, because the Law of Heavens wizards in the Empire have nothing on the expertise and knowledge that the dragons hold, you know. So the fact they have something just so much more advanced, and of course it's jade, right? You can see it's all green everywhere because it is potentially channeling the power of the dragons once again. So pretty cool to see. Pretty cool to see. If not, it's certainly a very powerful thing, and you have to make it green, or else people aren't going to know that it's the Dragon Emperor that's given them such a fantastic gift, you know, of destruction on the battlefield. So it's got to look the part. So anyway, notable characteristics. A mounted spellcaster with access to unique long-range spells that deal extreme damage to enemy formations. So it did say that, not the alchemists, astromancers could use this as a mount option, which is cool. So it's good to know that it's a unit and a mount option. At least I think that's the case. It seems to be. You know, the way this is formatted. It doesn't say specifically, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's in play. But anyway, more than capable of tearing up the ground and crashing headlong into enemy forces, making it a Yang-aligned unit, which is interesting, but with significant ranged prowess. So I find that very interesting. I think it's because I guess it's a balance thing in a lot of respects, because I think if you just had that and a bunch of heavy infantry, then you would have everything covered. You'd have no reason to bring like a back line. So I think it has to be. It has to go with. It has to favour the melee focused of the, you know, yin yang. I think, just for balance reasons. But it could just be because the dragon is, you know, the Dragon Emperor is more focused on that, and he's the celestial one, right? So that's more his law of magic. So it has to be his. Could be. There's all kinds of reasons, but either way, I think it makes sense for gameplay reasons. So I'll take it. So regains its own power with increased speed thanks to control over the elemental winds. So yeah, it can help channel magic and things. Cool. Fire Rain Rocket. Nice. I like it. Again, what if New Year, but Battle New Year. The ultimate in ranged firepower for the armies of Grand Cathay, these rocket launchers spray the battlefield with deadly explosive projectiles. Vital for pitched battles, as well as taking or defending settlements. Their rockets equally effective against almost all targets, and the arc of their fire easily penetrating enemy walls. While the impact is widespread at long range, this is only more effective against massed legions of enemies. Very, very cool. I mean, it's a Hellstorm rocket battery, basically, which, fine, brilliant. They have a flame cannon and a Hellstorm rocket battery. That's some serious firepower. And also, good arc, a good firing arc. The fact that they like to dig in with their army, I think it's really cool. They have a lot of abilities to, like, mitigate defensive structures and things, and just rain fire, big area of effect damage in areas, you know, for defending as well. It's just nice multi-purpose there. Good for dealing with hordes of stuff, which I think makes sense. I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah, very cool. You know, it's their disciplined ranks that are going to deal with the big stuff, right? I'd assume so. Anyway, notable characteristics. Has an inferior range, but greatly improved firepower over the Grand Cannon. Left to its own devices and placed near a melee unit to increase reload speed through Yin harmony, fire rain rockets will happily wipe out whole formations. So this as well I think is kind of interesting because it encourages you to keep ranged units defending your artillery, because your artillery will actually be more effective. So even if it's a case of just have a unit of peasant spears, always, just some cheap unit, doesn't cost much upkeep, and just consider it an upgrade for your cannons. I think that's a really interesting idea to sort of have that. Again, everything, all this harmony stuff, it seems to be really good at sort of encouraging new players to play the game in a sort of cohesive way, to sort of learn how to keep formations and things, which I think is super interesting. I really can't wait to see how it plays out. But yeah, really, really interesting to see these little weird mechanics. I want to get my hands on them and really see how it functions and see what these bonuses are and how much of a difference they make, really. I can't wait to find out. But there's some interesting concepts, interesting like strategies and things to think of with this stuff. So both Cathay and artillery pieces have a higher than usual number of support staff on hand, always more bodies, making them that much harder to wipe out if caught. So finally, here we are at the bottom of the page. There you have it. The massed forces of Grand Cathay ready to defend the world from chaos. What takes your fancy? Or which units are you particularly worried about as you push on the Great Bastion? Yeah, that. What, guys? What units do you fancy or are scared of? Or maybe both. Maybe there's sort of you know, maybe you're scared of it, which is a bit sexy. You know? Let me know. Let me know which units you are sexy scared of. So I think there's some really cool stuff here. I really can't wait to get my hands on it. I think there's a lot of stuff culturally that we can sort of infer about Cathay now that we have more information on it. And it's feeling more, in my mind, like a coherent faction. Rather than just like the old like rumour and hearsay that we used to have. For Cathay, you know, the last few weeks we've definitely got a more robust indication of what the culture is like and how it functions and what everything is. I think it's really cool. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited indeed. So let me know your theories about anything that I've spoken about. You know, or simply, what the hell were you talking about there, Janet? You lunatic. But whatever, you know, whatever takes your fancy. Other than that, comment, like, subscribe, and if you want to pre-order Warhammer 3, then go to nexus.gg/Janet, because that way I get some money out of it. And with the huge delays, I say huge delays, they're delayed from the end of the year, where ad rates are really good, to the start of the year, where ad rates are terrible, like literally half as much as they are in December. Yeah, I could do with the odd tip. So if you do want to pre-order it, yeah, it would be helping me out a lot. It really would, genuinely. Like, I do this for a living, and that would help. So, yeah, appreciated in advance. If you don't want to pre-order it, though, I totally get it. I never pre-order games, because they might turn out rubbish. But personally, I think this one's going to work out all right. And if you agree and you have no qualms about pre-ordering, then, yeah, I'm not going to stop you. But, yeah, no pressure otherwise. I don't want it to be my fault that you bought a game that didn't turn out well. That would suck. So, yeah, no take-backs. Anyway, guys, yeah, enjoy your week, and I'll see you the next one. Take care, guys.